A is the amount you owe, and you should know that that's the amount you owe if you wait until the end of the period of time to make the payment. So this is not talking about monthly payments. This is talking about you get the money and it's a 3-year loan. At the end of the 3 years, here's the money that you owe. P is called the principal. Which is the amount that you borrow. R is the interest rate. Oops. In decimal form. So whatever interest rate you're given, you need to divide that by 100, and that's the number that you use. T is the number of years you borrow the money for. And it can be any number of years. If you borrow the money for 4 years, then you don't pay it back until the end of the 4 years, but this would be 4. And N, this is the one that's I think most of you kind of struggle with. N is the number of compounds per year. What do I mean by that? It's how many times interest is collected or added to your account every year. And you need to know the following ones. Annual, N is 1. Semi-annual, N is 2. I'll just move this over. Quarterly, N is 4, and then you might see monthly. Actually, I shouldn't say you might. You will probably encounter monthly, which is 12. And that, in a nutshell, is everything you need in order to answer these questions. Okay? But this is given to you. This is given to you on exams. It's on your formula sheet. If you have that formula sheet I gave you a couple of weeks ago, you'll see it's on there. But none of this other stuff is. You need to know that this other stuff is what it is. You need to know what A is and P is and N and R and T and all of that. So if we take a look at question 1 here, and you're going to have an assignment a little bit later today that's going to be turned in. For a loan of $8,000, what's the following? What is the total cost if no repayments were made? So, did I write that down right? Okay. This is the formula you use when no repayments are made. As soon as it says you're not making any monthly payments, it means you're going to make one big payment at the end. This is the formula you use. So when we jump ahead here, we just jump ahead and look at B. What's the total cost if monthly payments are made? That has nothing to do with the formula. Nothing at all to do with the formula. So we take a look at this. The principal is $8,000. That's how much you borrow. R is 4.5 divided by 100. And some of you will make a mistake here. You'll just move that decimal place in your heads, and you might say 0.45, or you might say 0.0045. Use your calculator just to make sure. So can you confirm for me that you get 0.045? Okay. So that's R. N, well, it says it's compounded semi-annually, so that means you get charged interest twice a year. So that's something you need to remember. Semi-annual is twice a year. And it's for a 5-year term, so T is 5. I think, well, there's 2 parts to what we learned yesterday. this, setting this up, but then making sure you can use your calculator properly in order to get the right answer. So we put 8,000 here. Is it 8,000? Yep. Multiplied by 1 plus 0.045 over 2 raised to the 2 times 5. And we did this problem yesterday. I mean, I did it on the board, you finished it, but one more kick at the cat, as they say. I want everybody right now to use your calculator and put that in and make sure whether you put it in all at once, I don't care, whether you calculate it in pieces and do it in stages, it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is you get the right answer. That's what we're here for. If you struggle with this, I would suggest that you calculate it in pieces. So you calculate that middle number, write it down very carefully. Don't just write it down, make sure you're copying it right. So I've calculated this to be 1.0225 raised, and I've calculated this to be 10. I didn't do it on my calculator, but if you need to put into your calculator 2 times 5, go for it. But 2 times 5 is 10. And then you can enter it in one shot. Remember, and it doesn't matter what kind of calculator you have, you don't do this. You don't go 8,000 times 1.0225 and then hit equals and then raise it to an exponent. That's not what it means. You have to take that number and raise it to the exponent and then multiply by 8,000. So if you want to do it in steps, you can do that and then multiply by 8,000. But there's no need to. You can put it into your calculator in one shot.
You forgot a 0.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. There we go. Raised to the 10. Okay, so 99, 93, 62. How much money did he borrow? $8,000. How much does he have to pay back? Almost $10,000. It's about $2,000 interest, that extra money he has to pay. So 99, 93, 63. This is the same question. If the total cost is to be found with monthly payments, all you have to do here is just think of it. It's $148.99 a month coming out of his pocket, month after month after month for 5 years. So in order for you to find out the cost, we can take 5 times 12, because there's 12 months in a year, times 148.99. That's it. Or you could figure out how many months there are in 5 years first and then multiply by 148.99. So about 8939. 8939.40. Is that right? Okay. And we talked about this. Part of what I want to do with you in this class is not just get answers, but learn things about money and life. He doesn't pay as much as he does if he pays it off all in one shot. He pays almost $10,000 back if he pays it in one shot. Whereas here, he only pays back a little less than $9,000. That's because he's not keeping their money, all of their money, for a length of time. He's putting some of it back immediately. How much interest would be paid? Well, we can take that 8939.4 and subtract. It was 8,000 he borrowed. So that works out to, and you can double check my math here, 939.40. You agree? All right, I'm not going to go through number 2. Number 2 says that Graham needs a $5,000 loan. One bank is offering him, I'll go through it briefly, but we won't do all of the calculations here because we did this yesterday. 2 years times 12 months multiplied by 214.91. This would be how much he would pay. The other bank is 3 years times 12 months per year times 143.76. And it turned out that this was more than this. And I had asked people to come up with a reason why you might want to go with the more, and I think, Addison, you said because maybe your finances are such that you can't afford $215 a month, but you can afford $144 a month. On the other hand, if you can afford $215, this is a better option because you pay less. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, we're going to move on here. So I need you to open your books to page 295, please. And this will not take long. We're going to just talk briefly about how you decide where you should open a small business, how you decide if you should open a small business, and what's involved in getting ready for that. When they say running a small business is often time-consuming and challenging, I would question that. Running a small business is always time-consuming and challenging, especially in your first couple of years. But if you plan things well, things will work out for you. I think you would agree if you had an idea for a small business, that's where it starts. You come up with an idea. I want to start my own nail salon. I want to start my own private 3D printing company. Whatever it is, you come up with an idea. But you have to start doing some research before you can begin. You can't just go to the bank and say, well, I'm going to borrow this amount of money, get the money, and then start your business. Here are some things you have to consider. I think this is the most important thing. I think whatever you do in life, you have to find something that you're good at and you enjoy most of the time. So if the business isn't right for you, don't just get into something because you think you can make a lot of money. It has to be something you're going to enjoy doing. Are you committed to it and will you stick with it even when things get tough? And I mentioned this yesterday. When you start a small business, the first year is going to be tough. You may have these big dreams that you're going to make all this money and you're not. You may even lose money in your first year. Is it feasible? Feasible means will it work? So is it likely to be profitable? Would you agree, and this is nothing against Wetaskiwin, but if I decided to open a ballroom dancing studio in Wetaskiwin, that's probably not the best location for having a ballroom dancing studio, where I'm going to give people ballroom dancing lessons, right? So you have to look at the location. I don't think that would be profitable in Wetaskiwin. And in order for you to decide whether it's likely to work or not, you have to decide on who your potential customers or clients are going to be. Are there going to be enough people interested in it, in other words? And these are all called market research questions. So we're going to take a look at one example together. Rayanne is an early childhood educator, and she's thinking of opening her own daycare. She lives about halfway between Moose Jaw and Regina in Saskatchewan, and she's trying to decide where she should open her daycare. She can open one in Moose Jaw, she can open it in Regina. The cost is going to be the same. She's going to use the same amount of gas every day to get to work. She's scoped it out, and there's a building she can rent in Moose Jaw that's the same price as a building in Regina. And here's what she's discovered. She's looked at the population of Moose Jaw, which is 33,274 people, and approximately 6% of the population are children that could go to daycare. They're 5 years or younger. And there are already 30 daycares in the city. You with me so far? Do you think it's important she knows how many daycares there are in the city already? Of course. Because if there's only one, I can tell you right now, if there's only one daycare in Moose Jaw, she should open her daycare in Moose Jaw. Right? And then we also have the information for Regina. The total population is 193,100. Again, about 6% are children that would go to daycare, and there's 142 licensed daycares. If I were to ask you right now, which city should she open it in? I hope everybody sees it's not a simple question. There's a lot of factors. You can't just say, oh, she should open it in Moose Jaw because there's only 30 daycares there. Whereas in Regina, there's 142. On the other hand, you could say, well, she should open it in Regina because there's going to be a lot more kids that qualify for daycare because of the high population. You see that there's issues at play here. Okay. So this first question is guiding you through. How many children are there in Moose Jaw and in Regina who are 5 and under? And all we need to do here is find 6% of the population of Moose Jaw and 6% of the population of Regina. So you can do that for me. Remember, 6% means 6 over 100. So 6 over 100, I know most of you know it's 0.06, but I'm going to write or enter 6 over 100 multiplied by 33274, about 1,996 kids. It's 1996.4, but we're just going to round to the nearest whole number because we're talking about people. If I do the same thing here, 193,100, I get 11,586. So, as I already said, there's obviously a lot more people in Regina. There are a lot more of her clients in Regina. But that doesn't mean it's the best bet. Look at the next question. How many children are there in each city for each daycare? So this is Moose Jaw. And this is Regina. So how many are there in each daycare? Now we know there are 30 daycares in Moose Jaw. And listen, I know those 1,996 children, even if they are all in daycare, are not going to be equally spread out in those 30 daycares. But let's find an average. We're finding an average number of children per daycare in Moose Jaw. So that would be 1,996 kids over 30 daycares. So about, is that right? You get the same number? That's a pretty big number, isn't it? Like, I mean, you can have a big daycare, right? But 66 kids, I wouldn't want to be in charge of 66 kids who are 5 years and under. You wouldn't be able to keep track of them all. You'd have to hire a lot of staff. What about Regina? Well, we know in Regina there are 148 that I see, 142 daycares. So if we take the number of kids, 11,586, divided by 142 daycares, what do we get? Whoops. $81, even more. Wow. Even more. Now, keep in mind, not all of the children are necessarily in daycare. I guess I'll round that to 82. Not all of the children are necessarily in daycare. But you have to start thinking of what we call in business supply and demand right now. Even though, so you're getting the same numbers? Okay. Even though there's all these other numbers flying around, since there's 82 children for every daycare in Regina, there's more of a demand for daycares in Regina. Imagine that all of the daycares were full of all of these kids. You've got 82 kids in each daycare. Whereas here, you only have 66.5. There's more of a demand for daycares here because this number is higher. So the answer to this question is she should open it in Regina. Any questions with that? Okay. So we're going to start, we've already answered that question. We're going to start with working on these two questions on page 296. I already said that you may get an assignment today that's due to be turned in. I don't know if I will give it to you today or tomorrow. We'll see how this goes. So I want you to get these two questions done, please.